next step. So we've got our board of maple selected, and it's time to process this lumber and make it something that we can use. Now, before we go any further, again, these videos are just for entertainment purposes, so please do your own due diligence. Do not take anything I do as instruction. Make sure you get proper training on how to use any of these tools, okay? They can be very dangerous, and the last thing we want is for you or anybody you love to get hurt in this process. So during this step, what we're going to do is take this DeWalt thickness planer and our board that we've selected, and we're going to plane this down to the proper thickness of the neck that we're going to be building, okay? The standard for fender is roughly 1 inch thick necks, okay? Now, the fretboard does take up about 1/4 inch of that. So our goal here is to take this board down from its original thickness to just about 3/4 of an inch, which gives us plenty of room to put that fretboard on there. And the way we're going to double check it is just with a handheld set of digital calipers here, and we're just going to make sure that we have a good starting point. This is still going to be pretty thick. Yeah, it's about 0.85 inches. So we're going to bring this down to 3/4 and then move on. Alright, welcome back. So we've got our piece planed down to about 3/4 of an inch, and it feels really great right now. So George and I took a minute and looked at the board, trying to determine which part was going to be the straightest and what's going to be the most visually appealing. What we settled on was this middle section right here, and I'm going to go now to the chop saw, and we're going to go ahead and cut off the end so we can get a nice 90-degree miter right there, and yeah, move on. Okay, so now we've got our middle selection here, and this is an interesting piece because we do have kind of a weird imperfection. It's not going to be a problem. But the next step that we're going to do is we're going to take that flat face that we had, one of these two flat faces, and we are going to run that through the joiner. The way that works is basically keeping that flush up against this fence, and this has a spinning blade right here that's going to take off the edge, and this fence with the table is actually a perfect 90-degree angle. So that's going to give us a nice flat edge right here that we can then reference off of in the future. Okay, so here we are again, and George has been patient enough to sit with me while I treated this lumber and busted it down. So now we have our selection made. The sides are square and true, and now we can do the fun part. And the next step here is we're going to go ahead and inscribe a center line. Again, the center line is the most important part of all this. Keep all the measurements in place. So we're going to trace the center line here. And then we're going to trace the outline of the guitar, and then we can make some cool measurements on how we're going to put the truss rod in and get started with the wrap. Okay, so we just finished routing the truss rod channel along the center line of this neck. Now that we have completed all the detail work with the edges still square, we can take it to the bandsaw and cut out the rough outline. But just to make sure we've got this all set up, we're going to insert this truss rod, make sure there's a good solid fit. And it's looking pretty good here. Just inside the line of the neck down here at the bottom, and up here at the top, it looks pretty solid and flush. And we're just gonna make sure there's nothing hanging out over the top, except for this little spoke wheel right here, which we'll cut a notch for later on. And we're all set. Okay, we've got the rough outline cut from the bandsaw, and if you look really carefully, you can still see all of the outline on this piece. So we've now attached some double-sided woodworking tape, and we're going to reattach the template and take it over to the router. Use a flush trim bit to get the outline exactly the way we want it. The main trick here is just to make sure that all the outline that you want to keep is inside those lines, or inside the wood, rather. Doesn't really matter if it's directly on there or not, on the outline that is. We just want to make sure that there's some material to chip away from all of this. And now, this is going to allow a flush trim router bit to right along this edge and trim off all the extra material that we have here. So let's go to the router table.
Hey guys, so we have a technical problem. The camera died, and we had a slight problem with the neck, but now we have our finished neck here, so welcome to it, and I'm going to let Lon kind of explain what he did and what happened and everything.
Yeah, so in not my most proud moment, looking at the neck that we were working with, everything was going great, but if you just lose focus for 1 second, sometimes accidents happen. Just to kind of show you what that can look like, and again reinforce why you want to make sure you have proper training on these tools. Again, all of these videos are just for entertainment purposes. I'll show you what happened. So that router just grabbed the last little bit of that neck as the grain crossed. You see, this grain runs this way, and if you're not paying close enough attention, that router can grab a piece and yank it out of your hand at tremendous speed. The forces there are absolutely incredible. So this neck is not completely lost opportunity. We can definitely do some custom work here, and this is going to be a very unique instrument. Afterwards, it did give us a chance to go ahead and finish this neck out. So we're going to move on to the next step now, which is to go ahead and start working on the fretboard.
Still working on this neck. We're gonna move on to the next step, and I believe that is the fretboard.
Yeah, so it's about time to go ahead and make this neck start looking more like a guitar. So what we're going to do here is start working on the fretboard. So what I recommend if you want to get started doing this kind of thing, you can find fingerboard blanks online at lots of different luthier supply shops pretty readily. They're not hugely expensive. I tend to make my own, but I do have a couple that we've just purchased directly online. What we're going to do is we're going to use a couple of special tools to make sure that the scale length is appropriate, make sure that the frets are in the right markers, and then we're going to go ahead and saw some fret slots. Okay, so here we are at the bench, and it's time to start cutting some frets. So what we've got here are a couple special tools, actually just one special tool really. This is obviously from Stu Mac. They're a leading supply company for luthiers. This is a scale template with the frets marked into this straight edge for the specific scale that we're using. So just like we've been talking about, Fender uses a 25.5-inch scale length. And what we're going to do is just take some wood tape, and some double-sided wood tape. Flip this over, make sure these edges are lined up with the scale that we're going to use. And then we're going to transfer this over onto our fret cutting miter box and get started. Okay, so here we are at the fret slotting station here, which this tool is a fret saw miter box. And you can make your own miter box, or you can find these from various suppliers online. And essentially its purpose here is it uses a little index pin on the inside lip here that actually fits into the teeth of this scale template that we're using. So what we've done is just taken some double-sided wood tape and attached this flush edge, this fretboard to the template and make sure that it's flush using a jointed edge of the fretboard. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to feed this in through here until it hits the index pin, and that will go ahead and create the 90 degrees that we need to cut perfectly straight lines in the fretboard. These bearings that you see right here on all sides are going to keep the saw at a specific depth. So once we have the piece of wood in here, the raw wood, what I'm going to do is move these bearings up to the lip on the saw, and that will show us exactly how high it is, and then we're going to set the depth based on the tang of the frets that we're going to use. In this case, we're going to look at about halfway through the fretboard, which is about 1/8 of an inch, or about 3 millimeters. So that's about how deep we're going to go. Okay, we are sitting down for the next step in the process, and today what we're going to do is we're going to put a radius on the guitar neck fingerboard. So every guitar fingerboard is going to have a slight curve to it rather than being completely flat. So to help in that process, what I've done here is I've built a very popular jig. I found the plans online and made a couple of modifications. And essentially, there's a couple different ways to do this. The traditional route would be to actually take the fretboard down to a level surface and to sand back and forth with a fretboard leveling beam, or radiusing beam, excuse me, to put a curve in that fretboard. By building this router sled and this pivot table, I'm actually able to cut down that time by probably about 20 hours. So 15 to 20 hours. So with this, what we're going to do is I'm going to take this fretboard, move it back and forth while the router sled moves this way, and this pivot table is going to inscribe the fretboard radius that we need. Okay, so now we've got the profile roughly etched out here. If you can see that little bit of curvature to the fretboard, that's the roughed out radius. So previously I had discussed the sanding beam. This is what one of those looks like. You can see it's got the radius right here for the specific guitar that we're building, which is 12-inch radius. And we're just going to attach some sandpaper to this and build a quick jig so we can finish off this sanding. Probably just 80 grit, 120 grit, maybe up to 220. We don't want to get too crazy with it before we put the inlay in. So we're going to build this jig real fast with just a couple jointed pieces of wood. I'm going to go ahead and lay down one of these first, again with just some double-sided sticky tape. And we're actually going to use the radius sanding beam to create the spacer. Flat side in right there. And what this is going to allow is to make sure that we've got a nice space right here. Off camera, I'll go ahead and tape that down a little bit further, but this will keep this from going back and forth. Don't want too much side play with it. We want to make sure that that stays nice and even so that no parts get worn down too much. So then we'll go ahead and mark the center line of the beam itself, and we'll lay down a couple pieces of masking tape here at the end to line up the center line here as well. And we'll line all those center lines up with the center line of the actual fretboard. Okay, so give me just a moment here. Already have the center line marked over here, so that'll be easy to transfer. same thing over here. And what that does is just allow us to make sure that we're still on the right path when we're doing this. So let's make sure we get that lined up. That's perfect. And over here, oops. There we go. Nice. Very nice. Stick that down. I'll go grab some sandpaper. But essentially, this is all we're going to do until we get a nice little even, beautiful radius on that fretboard. Okay, so now we're here at the drill press. What I've done is I've taken the template that we used and inscribed a dot here. I've made a punch where each of the machine heads is going to go. So the next step here is we are drilling these holes for the machine heads to go in, and we'll install the tuners. I recommend doing this after you have the tuners in hand so that you can test and make sure that you're using the right fit bit. Alright, next step that we have is installing the truss rod. I have cleaned off the edges here with some acetone just to make sure there's no dust or residual debris from the previous operations. What I'm going to do is tape off this area so that the silicone will not actually make more of a mess than it has to. I'm going to tape that up real quick. If there's a little bit of squeeze out, that's okay too. We'll clean that up again before we glue the neck on. Okay, and that's just going to sit in there just like that. I'm going to use some silicone here right at the nut, about one dab right here in the middle, and one dab here close to the end. A lot of people make the mistake of just covering the entire channel with silicone, and that can make a huge mess. So we're just going to keep it kind of minimal here. That ought to do it. Okay. Next step here is, well, we're getting really close to gluing the fingerboard to the neck. So you can see this center line, the remnants of this center line here. What we're going to do is actually take the fretboard and prepare to glue it on. To do so, we're going to line up the center line that I have marked on the edge of the fingerboard with the center line of the neck. Do the same thing down here. Now you notice I've actually cut a slot right here for the truss rod adjustment. It's kind of a custom move for George's guitar. And so that's going to help us with a little bit of an anchor point. But to make sure that there's no further twisting in the neck, I'm actually going to install a couple little guide pins that'll help keep it from twisting as we move forward. And we'll just do that right here on either side of the channel. One right down there, one right down here. All right. Obviously that's going to be too tall, so I'm going to just go ahead and take a pair of snips to these little guide pins. And what I'll do here, this is the last chance to really line it up perfectly, so take your time. And this is a tip that I found online. If you're interested in more detail with this, I recommend checking out Fletcher's guitar videos. And I'm going to go ahead and line this up and make sure it's looking nice and neat. And then we're just going to go ahead and give this a nice press down once it's lined up, which is going to create a couple divots on the back side of the fretboard, which then I can drill out. And that's going to just make it real easy just to drop this right down where it's supposed to be. So that ought to do it. And we're just gonna give it a nice little press, and now we should have a couple little dimples here on the back, and we do. So I'm gonna drill just a tiny little bit of a space here for these little inserts, and then we'll go ahead and get ready to glue the neck. Okay, we're here at the next step, and we're on the home stretch of getting this fretboard on. So what I've done here to prep for this step is I have wiped down this surface and also this surface with some acetone, just to clean up any residual stickiness or dust that may be there. I'm going to now go ahead and tape the truss rod so we don't get too much glue down in that channel. Afterwards, we'll go ahead and get ready to spread this glue out and place the fretboard. We're going to have to move pretty quick, and just to show you here in advance, we are just going to smooth out the glue here. We're going to rip this tape off, drop this fretboard on. It's going to seat very nicely on those two little pins that we made, and then we're going to put the old sanding caul right back on top to add a little bit of weight, clamp it up, let it sit overnight. We should be good to go. So starting off right here, you want to work quickly, but you don't have to rush through it. Just put a little bit of glue there, here as well, and we're just going to spread that out a little bit with a finger. Putting the old kindergarten finger painting skills to use. I have plenty of glue so we get a little bit of squeeze out along the edge. Once we clamp this down, that'll make sure that we get a good fit. Get a good stick right now. So we'll peel this up. Just put that over to the side for a moment. Maybe get a little bit more glue. Okay, that was looking good. Okay, I just felt that lock in right there, so that's good. And that is locked in down there as well. So now we are in business. Drop this caul on top. Try and get fairly well centered as well. There's this wax paper underneath. It's a hard lesson to learn if you don't put that down. Spend all that time working on the neck and then accidentally glue it to your table. Almost sounds like I've done that before. Looks like we've got a nice little bead of glue all the way down the edge. So I think we're in business. In case you're wondering, yes, I could use more clamps on this. But I think this will do for now. So we'll let this set overnight, come back and check our work tomorrow.
Alright guys, this is all we have for you today. We have to wait for the neck to be clamped. And then what are our next steps, Son?
Yeah, so tomorrow we will take a look at the glue and make sure everything looks good. Do a nice little cleanup on the job, kind of scrape off any of the excess. And from there, we're going to start having some real fun and actually shaping the neck. So
awesome.
Stay tuned.
Great.